Thank you. So I'm Pierre Winnepennings. I'm the CEO of Node Aviation. We're based in Singapore. Maybe some of you know me already. Quite active in the ISP, especially in the COP of C&Q. And then we have developed an interest for the ChatGPT and the like. And Dominic, which is working with me, and is definitely way younger than me, seems to be catching up those things a little bit faster. So what we'll try to do here is that I will have some questions, and you have prepared some material, and we'll try to familiarize the audience on what is really ChatGPT. And maybe, Dominic, you can give a little bit of your background and then explain to us what is LLM and RAG in your world.
Okay, sure. So thanks for joining us. I'm not like Pierre. I'm quite new to ISP, I guess, but I'm very happy to be here. It's very interesting to be part of such a group which tries to change the pharma in the right way. And the idea for this whole webinar, or even going further back for the whole research we've been doing into the large language models, has really originated in like 5 months ago when I joined Node Aviation. And that was like, everybody remembers the revolution of ChatGPT just spreading everywhere, and people in their families sharing, or at work sharing, taking out your phone, saying, "Hey, look at this stuff." It's just, it just sent an email to my boss or whatever it does, right? So once that spread, it really like raised some questions, right? And my background is generally in automation. So I would be working mostly on the production lines. And I really like the idea of not working, I guess, if I can do it, just automate it and focus on the next thing. So the idea that the thing in my pocket can actually do quite a lot of my tasks, I would say pretty cool. But it also raised questions, right? So where did it come from? Like, what does it know? How does it work? And in pharma, it's where you try to regulate everything, right? And make sure that there's no risk of invalid information or data leak, right? And everybody just using their phones for everything. That was very, I guess, exciting, but at the same time, quite dangerous. So that's the origin. That's why we started off.
Yeah. Can you just refresh my memory? What is RAG?
Oh yeah, RAG is Retrieval Augmented Generation.
Meaning?
So that's a additional technology on top of the large language model, which I'll be explaining in further slides. But basically, it allows us to give the answers directly from the document. So that gives you a solution to the randomability of ChatGPT, which, at least for now, is still gonna be there. But when you actually get the quotation from the document, and it tells you which document it used, which page it used, right, which author, then the validity of the answer goes up a lot.
I think that's one of the key points which I learned from ChatGPT, right? There is a randomness in ChatGPT. So if you ask twice the same question, you might have twice similar, but not identical answer, right? And I think in one of the other question when we start on this journey was really to say, how can we make sure of the source of the answer? Because like you say, the pharma is a regulated environment. And we want to be able to, we don't want to take any blog post as a source of truth, which is, I don't know how much of ChatGPT is doing that, right? But what we want to do at some point is to make sure that the model we're using is not doing it.
Yeah, I think there was a whole point about a big amount of the knowledge from ChatGPT actually coming from Reddit. Okay. So that kind of gives you an answer where at least some of that information comes from. And don't get me wrong, I love Reddit, but if it tells you, how to do the validation, and that answer is coming from Reddit, not necessarily the best approach, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe from qualification it could work, but when we really come from the GMP environment, we want to use the original document. So tell me a bit about, the just learning, just Google it and just.
Oh yeah. So that's, I think, the big change, which is already here. It's already happened, but I think many people still don't really know how to name it. It's the change in how people access knowledge. So in the past, it used to be word by word, then books came up, and then it was all about knowledge books. And now things have changed. So about around 20, 25 years ago, the internet really started off and Google came in, and you never really went, like, you still go back to books, but for the easy questions, you usually go to Google. And that's also where you'd find the books. So,
Yeah.
and
I went to the university before the 2000, and I remember when we were doing scientific article, we had to go to those massive book index to try to find the article that was talking, and then they bring a computer, and then they bought the internet. And I think in the last year of my university, I started to have like internet page as my reference of document and things like that. So definitely the just Google it is people that are working today. It's almost like it became a joke, right?
yeah. But now it's gonna go to a step further, right? So now actually Google has been losing traffic, which is something I think no one really predicted. Everybody was like, oh, nothing can move Google, right? And now, like, quite often you just ask ChatGPT, because you don't really need it to be 100% valid, but if you can have it, so fast, and it can reiterate it, and give you actually more information, then yeah, that's what's happening now, and that's what's gonna stay, at least.
Well, I agree, right? And I'm going to bring back to the ICHQ9 and risk-based approach, right? If what you need could be easily accessible, and the level of effort and the veracity of the information is somehow good enough, yeah, I agree. I definitely move to ChatGPT for a lot of my research myself, whether it's like personal or professional, because it gives you the answer, whether Google point to you where you can get the answer, right? So and the other thing of ChatGPT is that he condensates many documents to give you that answer, which is, the beauty, and like we discussed, the danger of it, because you lose the source of the knowledge.
Yeah, it gets watered down quite significantly. But this really change has really just begun. Okay, there are many different opinions about this, but I think one opinion which is dominant is that things are gonna change a lot. We don't really know how fast or when or which direction, but we do know that they are changing, and like Pharma can try to stay out of it, but as proven at the beginning of the year, everybody uses ChatGPT anyways. If you like it or not,
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think, whether you want it or not, we are leaking information to ChatGPT at a rate I think we don't even understand, like confidential information and things like that, to some company banning ChatGPT overall. I think, we need to, it's like, I remember when internet came out, I had friends who were putting the SOP of the client directly on the web page, right? Because that was easier to share than, and then we realized it was a public web page and everybody have access to the SOP. So the same stuff, the same understanding education need to happen with those ChatGPT or language model, and I'm sure they will adapt to it as well.
I think
yeah, we take back I see like 6 months ago, some people I can speak with AI, but for sure it won't be able to speak back. I also saw like some panel of discussion at the conference where people saying like AI is not ready to write URS. Well, that was 6 months ago, right? Because I can tell you today, it's a question of will, but I do think that SOP, URS, user manual, most of those things will be, if not, are already contributed by AI, because I'm pretty sure that most of the people in the pharma that need to write an SOP cross-check the grammar, the English, or some part of it with ChatGPT. And in the future, we will have those tools directly integrated to make that knowledge transfer. And for me, that's really the key, right? The AI will bring another step in the access of knowledge.
Yeah, it's for the URS example you said, it's just a matter of time. And actually, technology is already here. It's just right now, I think it's still quite inaccessible, so it would take quite a lot of time to do that. That means it will probably happen, like one way or other. maybe even this year, like who knows, but it's not.
You're gonna make it happen this year, no?
Oh, I could try. Like I've already done a few of my approaches, and I've had pretty good answers. I've thrown like 10 URS questions against the document pack, and I got 7 out of 10 answers.
But that's even go further, right? Is checking the URS according to something. For me, you know, ideally, I would say at least in the ISP guidance, a new baseline guide, they say, you know, the URS should ask what you want to do and not necessarily how you want to do it. The URS should be, you know, in the smart may, which is like a specific measurable and things like that. So you can easily take any requirement and put it in a language model that have been, again, not necessarily the ChatGPT, but that have been like catered and tuned for that to say, okay, this is my requirement as a, make it a URS requirement, and then it will, you know, break it in bullet point, in number of line and things like that, and put a bit of structure in the data we would like to have in the URS. But eventually, you know, maybe in 2 years, we won't even write URS anymore because all that would be integrated in the pool of knowledge. Right?
Yeah, I think it's, as you were saying, just a question of time. So, but the way the industry or all of the AI stuff will be going is most probably modular design. So instead of having a one all-powerful GPT, which will basically do all of that work, there'll be multiple small custom AI dedicated for a specific process, because that's how you really maintain the quality, not by going, you know, shooting at everything at one time, but really laser focusing on one job. And then when you have those small modular AIs, you can kind of create a scheduler, which will just basically tell them how to work in what order. And at that point, you basically have the quality of small models with the, let's say, overarching scheduler. And the additional benefit to that, which not many people I think mention, is the let's say the processing power. Because right now there's a lot of processing power going into AI models, which is obviously a big issue at times where we are thinking about the climate, right? And using the big models for small tasks is what we do right now, because this is just what we got, right? But with time, that will calibrate and optimize into smaller models, because you really don't need to blast the candidate small.
Yeah. Well, I have that fear that every time I type something in ChatGPT, an iceberg disappears somewhere, right? Due to the power consumption. So, yeah, definitely. And I read somewhere that it costs a lot of money to ChatGPT to run their model.
I think I read half a year ago or 4 months ago, it cost them $700,000 per day to run it.
Yeah. I read something that if Google was paying as much as ChatGPT by request, Google would be bankrupt today, something like that. And that's also something which eventually, because the cost is on the power of computation. So if you could like narrow it down from the source, eventually, well, that's out of our field of expertise, but it's just like a lot of challenge from a technical partner. We might discuss a little bit where we're going with that and how we can use it in the pharma.
Yeah, there's like we can go very wide in the subject. One thing just to finish off, like the predictions of the AI, is I really like the chart which I'm showing now. It's just showing more or less the predictions according to Metaculus of when will the argument reasoning AI come, because right now we have very smart like word creator based on probability, but when it will be able to start reasoning, and that's when it will really probably take off, especially in validation, right? And the predictions usually were like very wide, but let's say generally 2030. And the moment ChatGPT came up, it just was cut down by 5 years, and it's still going there. So right now, like the prediction is that at the beginning of 2026. So that's just like 2 years away. And
in 2 years away, the Turing test would be obsolete, and you won't be able to tell if it's a machine.
I think the Turing test has been already partially done, but I'm not saying this is going to be like the real AGI, right? But it's gonna to start being more, let's say, creative. And where that goes, there are many theories. I really don't want to go that pathway. That's a really different Tech Tuesday, more about philosophy right now, because no one really fully understands the answer, the answers. But yeah. So we have the small poll for you guys regarding like what you think is the biggest risk regarding using these for validation, right? So if you would like
Well,
to,
that's super small.
yeah, that's very small. Okay, so when will AI be able to apply critical thinking to regulatory support, right? So that's
So what's that? Like what do you call regulatory support? It's like you
okay.
say,
So you just go out with a question, right? Or like a deviation. You know, what do I do in this case? So for example, risk assessment, right? That's a big thing. And risk assessment can already be done, but it will be just reiterating risk assessments it knows from the past, which is great. But is it really critical thinking? Like
for me, I like my for and I give you some time to answer the question, but like really for me, if we can combine the machine learning with the large language model, where those risk assessment take not only the verbiage, but take the real data process. And then, you know, there are a couple of examples, and we're working on a few other, but where instead of, you know, trending data to make decision, you could question your data and you get, you know, in that deviation, it can explain to you what happened based on the actual prehistorian data or BMS data that you feed into the model, right? And instead of having those data points, you can transfer those data points in understandable knowledge to a regulator, a QA person, an engineer, and he can even tune the answer based on the audience.
Yeah,
right?
but that's where that's where you really need the.
So when do you think that's going to happen? Next year?
That's 2 years from
2 to
now.
5 years?
Yeah, we still have some time, but possibly not much. You know.
How can we see the result of the poll?
Hi, Pierre. Sorry, I didn't collect any answers.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, I don't. But you were able to see the question, right?
Yeah, we were. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
I guess we gave a lot of answers anyway. So
like for me, like if I look at it, I wish it's gonna be in 3 years. You know, because I think in my view, 3 years I will feel safe enough to rely on those tools and things like that. But I don't think, you know, mentally we will be ready to accept those. And I hope it is before 10 years, because I think there is, you know, ICHQ9 say we need to focus on where the risk quality is, right? And if those tools allow us to focus really on building quality, that'd be good, right?
It's a small forecast, but yeah, that's.
So, yeah, let's talk about those.
So the security risks, right? So I think by now everybody has pretty much heard about what security risks are related to the large language models. And for me, of course, there's a lot, but 3 ones which really stand out is the accuracy, because the model really does have lots of hallucinations. Like the quality of the outputs doesn't really fulfill quite often the requirements we have in the industry. And the second biggest risk is the compliance. So right now, no one knows it's compliant or not. And even if you had a model, how do you make it compliant, right?
Compliant to what?
Compliant according to standards. You know, how do you rely on that answer to make to be able to use it to prove,
to be GMP compliant? To make sure,
compliant.
like, you know, can I do that? And he say, yes, you can do it. This is the way you need to do it. And you're sure that you have understood the GMP principle and you have translated in action, right?
Exactly. Okay. And the third one, the biggest one, of course, is the data security.
So data security in what sense? That you're leaking your data to?
Well, if you're still using just the web browser of ChatGPT, not the API or the enterprise version, then they actually store your data for 30 days. Like they promise they will not be sharing it, but that's a promise, right? Okay. And then if you are using API or have the enterprise, you're still sharing it, just that they deleted immediately after, but that's what they say. I'm not saying OpenAI is bad necessarily. I think
they can be hacked like anybody else. Right?
They can be hacked, and also in general, you don't. If you have a pharma company, the idea of sharing data is generally something we want to cut down on, not increase.
But then also, even if they don't share it, they use it. I mean, if you don't have the enterprise model, they use it to train their model. So their future answer might not quote your data, but could eventually use part of that.
Not really. Actually, they don't use it at all. So that's what they say. They don't use it. Instead, they keep on stealing data from the internet. They have.
So if it's not like so, if I upload a document on ChatGPT today and say, "Can you answer based on those questions?" That document is not going to be used to train their model, or we don't know, or maybe
no. In general, their official statement is no.
Very
And
interesting.
it's part of their software as a service agreement, I believe.
Mhm.
So generally it is secure, I would say, but it really depends where you are, right?
Yeah.
For example, for China, that's definitely not enough, like it's still,
Mhm.
let's say, American company, right?
Yeah.
And then there are other risks, which I'll go into now. This is a whole big table, but one of them is the vendor lock-in.
Did you ChatGPT that or you made it
Oh, I
yourself?
ChatGPT everything.
Okay.
There's nothing. Okay, I do really go through everything he gives me, but 90% what I do is going through ChatGPT one way or other.
Mhm.
So the vendor lock-in is one other big risk. It's not necessarily connected to data as such, but I think the AI will go in many different ways, and OpenAI really is trying to do a great job. And I generally admire them at being one for all, right? So being like the Swiss knife, so you can use it for anything you want. And that's great. But the problem is they will also, if you go down that way, because OpenAI doesn't really share that much of how the inside work of it, like not like the open source models, which are, you can download them, you can see everything inside, right? It's a black box. And once you start using that, you may come to a point where it's almost impossible to go back, because you'll be so integrated in the service, the API. I'm not saying right now it's such a big problem, but it could become such down the road. And yeah, so and you here have a comparison, generally how I see the differences between global solutions like ChatGPT and open source. So open source is the one we've been researching a lot lately, and I think there's a lot of promise.
Just a question, right? Because I don't understand much, right? What's the difference between open source and OpenAI?
Okay.
Why is OpenAI not open source, and why?
Oh, that's
a
actually
computing
funny.
marketing stuff.
OpenAI was supposed to be open source.
Okay.
But it was bought by I don't remember exactly which company it was. Maybe it was part of Microsoft. And OpenAI is not open anymore. It should be closed AI, honestly. And it's one of the reasons why people don't really like them too much, because they were supposed to be something else. They were supposed to revolutionize the industry and make everything open, which.
And then there is a greedy company who say no.
Yeah, basically, yeah. But there are still a lot of open source projects, like.
And how can they compete with OpenAI then?
The way they compete is if you have an open source project, you have basically a whole community working on it. So, for example, like one of our R53, right? Partner, they have hundreds of people contributing to the project. So anyone can download it. Anyone can use it.
Like Linux.
I think so. Yeah, something very similar. So it's based
That's my age, 2099. We were talking about Windows and Linux. Now they're talking about OpenAI.
Linux is still here. I mean,
exactly.
strong, right?
So yeah.
Like because
Me too.
For every closed source software, there usually is an open source software somewhere, right? And open source software has a lot of more. It's obviously open and it's transparent, right? It's, let's say, free to extent where you can download it, and if you know how to use it, you can just use it for free almost, right? And it does offer also lots of extra features. So one of the things I was talking about is the long-term savings, right? For open source models, you can generally decide how big you need it and how you want to use it. There's lots of customization you can do. So you can fine tune it for your needs. You can make it bigger, or smaller, really. You can really modulate how it works. And I think what's most important here is you can basically control it 100%. So you can run it even I have one running on my laptop, and on a virtual machine. And there's no way that is sharing with anyone, because it can run offline, right? It's a closed architecture. So you don't have to risk using anyone. The only person is risking is maybe you mess up something. But yeah, that's.
So you think we could see those kind of model, being an automation engineer working on the production line, we could see those kind of model coming in our PLC and in our
definitely. Even for PLC software, you have open source projects, right?
Yeah. But you could have AI locally put in those machines to support some kind of non-critical decision first, and then.
I think it's a question of time. I know Cognate, I think, or one of them is actually developing already their own open large language model, which will be connected to the manufacturing, the PLCs and stuff like that. So
because like just to share a little bit what Dominic did and showed, right? For those which are maybe not familiar with ChatGPT, you can ask ChatGPT to give you a code in Python, right?
Oh yeah.
You can also ask ChatGPT, you give him the code and you say, explaining what I'm seeing, and he can explain it to you. So for me, this would be extremely useful in a case of troubleshooting, right? If a machine is, not performing, and we know it's might be linked to the code or anything like that, having on the machine an AI that say, explain me the code, that would be a possibility in terms of root cause analysis. I wouldn't take it for granted, but it could definitely narrow down the time I will need to debug something or do something like that.
Honestly, like they are doing it already. I've seen, I think there was a demo just a month ago, one of the conferences, I think it was SBS in Europe, where they were actually like asking, how did the batch go? What were the results?
Can you imagine, like, you don't need to install, like, when I was a kid, just installing a printer was a nightmare, right? Because you had to download all those software. Today, printer, like, they find it. But like, if you could connect your LIMS to your need system by asking a ChatGPT, like, make me the code. And then, of course, the code is given, it doesn't change, we validate the code. That wouldn't change at the moment. But today, just to get that code, you need an army of people that understand both systems, right? So there would be possibility to say, I want this to be code, and then we're going to validate the whole code. But you could have every line of code explained by the AI, and therefore it's much easier to validate.
This is actually very useful. I know people are using it for legacy systems, right? Because legacy software, there's quite often the issue that there are not many people, like there's no one relearning that. But there may be some people which have done it in the past, right? But with time, when you were talking about software, which was like 20, 30 years ago, there's usually like no one left, you know? So then of course, you can ruin the life of some programmer and tell him, okay, now you spend a year, trying to learn this and fix it.
Retro engineering it, right?
Yeah, or you can actually use all the knowledge, which is still in text form. Like all of that is still there. No one knows it, but it's still there. And just use that to incorporate a large language model and make it a lot more accessible. And the programmer will still have to sit there. It's not like it will happen by itself, but at least he can get basically the support you get even now.
Speed up his work, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Am I coming to Pharma?
Yeah, so now I'll go maybe a bit more into the RAG, so the reverse augmented generation. So that is also touching on what you said. And this is a project also I will be probably working very soon on. Is basically using the textual data to give you answer. So that really it works for code, but one thing it works perfectly for, and I actually done it before, is logs. So in my previous job, what I would often do when something failed, I would check the logs. And I don't know if you've done Windows logs before, but usually the information is very brief, and it's the ID that it really gives you information. But the ID you have to cross-check with whatever it means, on Google, and it's a lot of work. So last time I did it, I just copied the whole log from Windows, wrote it to ChatGPT, and told him, okay, what's happened here? And he goes, okay, at this time of this hour, there was this failure, and that caused the system to restart, and we have this error logs between that, right? Perfect, right?
Yeah.
And you can do the same thing on your logs from the process. I wouldn't go as far to say our technology right now is great to connect to the process data, because that's a lot more complicated. But just, reading out the logs to you, saying, okay, yesterday a few things happened. We had these alarms, that person logged in a few times, and then a few times he forgot his password. So maybe, just make him remind so he doesn't block the system.
I saw that ChatGPT. I don't. Okay, you don't do any of those things. You can do it at home. Don't do it at work, right? I saw like ChatGPT have now data analytic tools, right? So you could put like I don't know, because we have a lot of historic on all, like you say, the logging, right? And we're supposed to review them. So you could put those one in a model, and it give you the exception, right? So I could tell you I would focus here and here because this is abnormal behavior.
I believe so. Even if ChatGPT doesn't do that, I've heard there are already other AIs which are focused on that. So finding the patterns which don't fit the rest.
Because for me, yeah, we all know we need to review the audit trail, right?
Yeah.
So what do we review? How long it take to review and things like that? And again, when we even if we automate it, right, we could say we make a rules and you highlight those. It won't catch up the new one, right? Whether an AI model could say, well, that's also a different. It's not in my rules, but it's a different pattern, and then you can see if there is like
yeah, that
things
could
you need to
definitely work.
investigate. Right?
So that's one use case. Another use case, and actually I gave myself the freedom of stealing some of ISP data, let's say, but no worries, it's your public one. So one of the newsletters you sent me a few days ago, I just used it as the example for this presentation. So I went as far as stealing the news, the highlights, and I went to do every one of those links. I copy pasted it all to my reverse augmented machine. I also pasted the PDFs, basically all the information which you would have in those articles. I copied it over to my large language model with the RAG connected. And you can see here more or less how this works. And this data which I put in, it can be anything, right? It can be PDF, it can be Excel, text, Word. It could be your chat history. You can even try to drop like pictures or scans of PDFs, because the RAG does also have OCR. So even if something,
but that makes sense, right? I mean, if the thing you can do AI, you can do OCR.
Oh yeah. Like it's generally very open to ingesting data. You can throw everything at it. Like there's a lot of work about making it more accurate, which I'll go into in a moment. But as a general rule, you can drop everything and you will have pretty interesting results. So here you have an example where after the dropping, which in total like took me 10 minutes maybe, I just asked, a question from one of the documents, right? From the control strategies for continuous manufacturing of solid oral dose drug products, which has just come out like a month ago. So I just asked the question, like, how does the design and integration of equipment on a continuous manufacturing equipment train influence over process efficiency and product quality, right? And I got a pretty good answer. So this is an example of how RAG works.
I welcome all the people that are mastering that field to challenge the answer we got, right? But for people who doesn't know much, it was already informative. I put it like that before you say,
Okay. But one thing which is great here is you get the quotation, right? You get the direct quotes from the document. And those quotes, like the answer obviously can be wrong, can be right, can be questionable. But the quotes...
Yeah, and that's something we were paying attention when we built our own first model and then in the second one. What we did, for example, with the FDA and the GMP and all those was to say, whatever answer we give, either if there is no answer, we said, don't know, the context doesn't allow me to answer your question. But if there is an answer, what we like to do, and I think in the pharma that's really important, right? It's to name all the documents that have been used to give you the answer, so that as a critical mind and to validate the answer, which we're quite good at doing in the pharma, is validating. So you can go back to the original document. So it's a little bit more than, I would say, a Google search, because it will like condensate all those documents talking about the topic into a simple answer, but it can also give you all those information. And I think those are the things that the RAG was offering, and I find it very reassuring because it builds the confidence in the answer, right? And it also showed that if I'm expecting to see one of the documents in the answer, like I see HQ9 and things like that, and they don't come up, to go back and tune the model and understand why those things don't come up, right?
Yeah, sure. So there's the whole subject of metadata, how to make the model even more accurate. But I think one thing which really shines out here is you can use this on your project documents, because as I said, you can run this on your local system, right? So you can basically upload like a project pack and then just ask questions of it. So going back to the example of the URS, right? Maybe we don't have the tool just yet to build the URS or automate the answers, but you can just copy paste the question to RAG and it, get the answer.
Can you imagine, right? And that's what we try to build, right? the amount of time we spend reading vendor document to do a design review, right? The goal here would be to put the URS and put like every point of the URS as a question to the RAG model, which is taking all the functional aspect and everything. And that document will say, well, you know, this section, this section, this section is there. And if something is there, well, you can go and validate and read it, right? But you can go, because I would say what you can also put in those documents is a non-verbal document, which are all the electrical drawing and things like that. And it could also, you know, point to alarm and component. And so I think with a bit of tuning, you know, but we're not far off, right? To be able to say, give me your 600 page of user manual of that tablet press, and I will see if my 3 user requirements are covering it and in which page you talk about those, right? Which then, you know, speed up the design review. If you don't find them, yeah, you don't know if they do not exist or your model is not good. But if you find them and the model tell you where they are,
yeah,
you do a pretty good job in your
also,
design review.
I think this is a great way, maybe not to create a document, but to create a solution to a situation where quite often we have documents which are only based on other documents, like master documents, maybe like a onboarding or like a company brochure, or quite often we create like documents which kind of summarize lots of information just to make it more accessible for the person coming in. Let's say also
like a PowerPoint presentation.
Like a PowerPoint presentation, yeah, or like the newsletter. With all respect, I love it, but
just pointing.
Maybe I want to have certain information, right? Not all of it. So then you can create this kind of model, and it will, like, you come into a company and you just ask, you know, okay, what's this company about? You know, who should I contact? You know, what are the
who do I call
procedures?
for my timesheet? Can I, you know, who is in charge of the work permit?
Yeah.
You don't need to read all the procedure. The model will say, according to this procedure, this is the guy in charge of the work permit. So you could say, you know, if I want to do and again, I take the example which are not directly related to the quality of the product and are quite generic in the industry, right? But there are a lot of those things that on a project cost a lot of time on onboarding people and transferring the knowledge. And I think those kind of tools, if they are integrated on the project SharePoint, where, you know, it's not going to the internet, but it's accessible to all your project team, could help you to get people to, you know, bring value faster to your project, because they don't need to seek, or they don't need, the information will be available when they need it and not when they come on board.
Exactly. I remember also when I was working as automation, I would spend at least 30% of my time waiting for some answer from this or that guy, which basically reiterated an answer which definitely exists in some kind of document, right?
Okay, yeah.
And this system could work like 24/7, cross borders, whatever, right? Someone in America could ask during the night, you know, a question regarding like, how does, you know, this part of your project work? Because maybe he's working on a module of it, right? And the SME is quite right now sleeping, and well, waking him up may not be
SME are always sleeping anyway.
Yeah, but the SMEs are actually a whole big subject, right? So like there's less and less, like there's more and more work and less workforce, right? And the SMEs are like lately, I think maybe due to my generation, like kind of jumping around a lot. So like saving their time is actually very critical for the facilities, because quite often what SMEs do is they waste their time just answering questions repetitively.
We have requests, and we are discussing, and we're happy to, you know, share more or to hear from the community to those topics and keep the discussion going. But instead of giving you a user manual of, you know, it's just giving you an AI model based on all the documents, right? So that you know, of course you will have the user manual, but you could ask, you know, what is, like you did with Windows, right? This knowledge is written somewhere. Before they will print it into, and you will look at the code, and then there was Google who point directly. Now you can say, explain me the stuff, right? Ideally, you could have the same for an autoclave, for a floor scale, for anything like, you know, it could say, what is this code? What is this slide? You know, and then how do I start it? How do I verify it? And you just ask, and it tell you, and it can say, can you give it to me step by step? And you could even go to the point, like, read it to me, and you follow it as he give you the recipe. I mean, ChatGPT have now a model for cooking recipe, right? It's
Oh,
quite
yeah.
amazing. You say, like, I have that in my fridge, give me a cooking recipe, and he give you, step by step how you need to cook your vegetable and your meat. But if you have a model, again, a bit more laser focused on the document, which are not only the user manual of your equipment, but all the document, functional specification, user manual, maintenance, electrical drawing, P&ID, and an AI model, which is really the interface of asking from the user perspective, how do I use that machine?
Yeah.
We can, and that could be built and stand on a laptop, kind of.
Yeah,
maybe.
you would have to have a very, like, depending on the
laptop.
model, right?
Yeah.
Because you can have less intelligent models on your laptop, right? Or you can have a big intelligent model, but maybe not the same on your laptop, but on your cloud, on your own server, right? Because let's be honest, like, laptop is great for personal, but for company, maybe it's better to use the cloud. Anyway, let's just, since this is like a Tech Tuesday, right? I'll just give some technical background to how the RAG is different from just the LLM, because we've been talking about all this magic of asking the questions of the documents, but it's generally pretty simple. So what RAG does is basically kind of what Google does. So Google has, let's say, a vector database of all the websites in the world, right? And when you ask him a question, he doesn't go, row by row checking, which one fits you. He has basically every website, every link has like a hashtag, and it's all in a multi-dimensional database. So when you're asking a question, it uses the same algorithm for your question as it uses for the website. So that way, it basically ingests all the websites and gives them their specific codes, right, based on the embedding algorithm. And then it goes, when you ask the question, it uses the same embedding methodology for your question and compares the code of your question with the whole vector database. And that's why they can give you an answer in 0.25 seconds, whatever they always, brag about it, right? So that's the same technology we use here. So we take all the documents
in the RAG.
In the RAG,
yeah.
So we take all the documents and we ingest them into the vector database. And this is the simple version. Like, we have lots of things around it. So you can add security for the documents, so not everybody has access to it. You can add metadata to, for example, separate documents which are, like, let's say, rule books from documents which are just reports, which could have varying the quality of data. There's many things you can do to make the answers better. And then in the end, obviously, when you ask the question, you get the model basically selects the chunks of data which best fit your answer. Like, depending on how you do it, let's say 10 chunks, every chunk would be, for example, 10 sentences or a chapter, right? And it takes the top 10, and then that's when the large language model actually comes in. It uses these chunks of data and your question to sum it up and give you an answer, right? So that way, it basically uses just the context. It doesn't use the knowledge he stole from the whole internet, because that knowledge he only uses for, let's say, general understanding of context. So yeah.
So it's a kind of hybrid model where you get the document, but then to make the nice sentence, you could go on the internet to get that model off.
You can, of course, allow it to access the internet, right? In the end, it's all an app stack. So you can app stack, that's an IT term, tech stack, let's say, So basically, these are technologies stacked on top of each other.
Okay.
So you can add a module or allow him to access the internet. You can even tell him, be creative, right? You can add more knowledge. You can also add multiple layers of, let's say, verifiers, right, to make the accuracy go up. So that's basically how ChatGPT 4 is better than ChatGPT 3. It's not that ChatGPT 4 is, has better technology. ChatGPT 4 is actually sum of multiple ChatGPT 3s talking with each other, and then you have like a board of directors which select which answer is the best, So it's like chunking them all together. So like all of these things you can do. It really depends on your specific use case, right? So going back to the knowledge leak I was talking about, I didn't even talk about knowledge leak. I was just talking generally about SMEs. So this is one of, I think, the main reasons why I really think that this could kick off, is that the current situation on most manufacturing sites, and I think generally most companies in general, is when they start up, when they have qualification, when they are developing, when they are building, what they actually want to use. You have all the smart guys, working together, fighting it off, making compliance, and the knowledge is really like hot. Everybody has answers. So there's usually that one guy who has answer to everything, right? But once that all passes, the operations start. At that point, like generally the people building it, most of them disappear, some of them stay. But those people that stay, they basically pass on the knowledge by word or by documents,
Oh yeah, or by interest, right? They might not have such an urgency to, it works. It's like me. I know how a PC works, and I know how to start up. I have no idea what's inside. And we see that like in the C&Q world, right? When you are in the C&Q, you can troubleshoot things in 5 minutes, and maybe a year after, people are just using it, not always being aware of why that functionality was originally there, right? Yeah. And that's why change control and things like that are important. But I agree with you. There is, and there is another knowledge, which is the operation knowledge, which is bringing, and maybe the engineering knowledge, which is decreasing. And your trend is true from an engineering perspective, but I think in terms of drug design, everything which is in the R&D, and then there is a certain conclusion, which is the filing we put, and then there is the operation. When we do the filing, we try to, have the bare minimum file. But if you could have a model that allow you to re-question all the R&D decisions that were made and the knowledge, and now we're not talking about 1 year or 2 years like here, but maybe 10, 15 years of knowledge that need to be transferred, which like multiple people working, definitely having those kind of models would be useful.
I believe we could almost like change the whole graph, right? So like a facility would mature,
Yeah. Well, that's the whole idea, right? That's the ICHQ10 and the continuous improvement and things like that. Right? The idea is that you gain more knowledge of your process. Now, the challenge we have today, and it's also the limitation, is like, yes, we gain more knowledge, but some of the knowledge we had is fading away. And what you're saying is that with this type of model, we could just gain more knowledge. And not fading away on the previous knowledge.
Yeah, for the large language model, it doesn't care about what kind of text. Is it boring or not? Is it for old people or not? It takes everything. You can plug it into like very old facilities where like the documents were almost like handwritten. Like, okay, that's not, I'm exaggerating.
Well, no, you thought that we still, we still handwrite all our protocol today, right?
Okay,
so,
okay.
So yeah,
and it could use that.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that's I think one thing which would really help out, and I hope it will excel in that. I think like one also important note, I think, in like since we're coming also to the end, is that we don't necessarily have all the answers right now, right? So this whole revolution has only just happened, but since we already know the technology already has all of these capabilities, and we know that it will be kind of growing over time, then generally speaking, I think it's important to understand that this is something which should be addressed. Like, I'm not saying we have the answers and we just came up with, the golden badge for whatever. I'm just saying that we should really nurture the culture of adopting this AI, because it will happen one or the other, right?
We should really see it as an opportunity, and like we do in ICHQ9, identified what are the risks and then try to mitigate it with the right model, with the right knowledge. But I think it is an opportunity, and trying to pretend it doesn't exist or it doesn't apply to us will be a mistake. I felt sometime, right, and maybe I'm crazy, but I really felt like AI is like that genius in the lamp, and we just like, we get the genius out of the lamp, and it's only our imagination which is limiting us on what we can get from it, right? But then you also need to be very careful of what you ask. Because you don't know what's going to come out of it. So
that's true. But one way or other, like, okay, this is a big assumption, but with seeing how this knowledge can really like elevate the access and the retention of the knowledge, right? I don't see a way how this would not become mainstream for all documentations over time. And I'm not saying about 10, 15 years, I'm more saying like 2, 3, maximum 4 years. And it should be basically the basis for everything, right?
So maybe for all the people that, like me and like you 5 months ago, are not expert into it, right? where would you tell people they can find the best information? Where they know, you're an automation engineer, but like, is there any, website, Reddit, things like that you feel could?
Okay, so I follow multiple sources, and most of them are a bit technical, although I do follow Reddit. I really like it because that's where people just throw ideas, and there's lots of rubbish, but if you know how to look, then actually there's quite a lot of knowledgeable people there. I also follow some podcasts like AI, Practical AI is one podcast, which they have, I think.
Where you find it?
On Spotify.
Okay, so there you go, Spotify. That's something I understand. So yeah.
Yeah. So Practical AI. Also, I think I have. Okay, there are a few others, but I don't exactly remember.
But if you want, like, if that's and we're gonna maybe open the floor to question for the next minute if you guys have questions, because I see that there is something in the chat. But Dominic has been, I would say, instrumental to my understanding of risk and opportunity and how we want to make that work, right? So we definitely want to create an interest group, and that's why we did this Technical Tuesday. And unlike OpenAI, we are open ISP, and we want to see and we want to hear from as many and find solutions. So feel free to contact us, and we could have a COP on it that we keep running. Dominic is developing a series of models to address some of the requests we have in the C&Q world in the onboarding of people and document and project. Do we have questions?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so what is your thoughts about validation approaches for GPT results? Hallucinations should be measurable. Hallucinations, that's a big angry word, people are mostly scared of. So right now, I believe the large language models are not 100% accurate. You can really get close to that by incorporating measures on the way. So basically verifying the process of generating a question, as I was saying in the abstract. You can verify it almost on every part, right? So for example, when you're asking a question, right, you can have a model which basically checks your question and makes it more digestible for the next phase, right? So it basically kind of creates a prompt based on your question. So that's to avoid people asking like, how do I don't know, and okay, so what now? Like questions which the AI doesn't know how to answer, but people still ask them, right? So you can have like a segment there where kind of it stops this from happening, and then you can have a segment for the embeddings. You can have AIs which are verifying the AIs. You can verify the answer.
But I think and then again, we're talking about ChatGPT here, but one of the answers to that, to the hallucination model, is to go back to your open source model, where you can then now calibrate it and know a little bit what you like. You're not using the Swiss knife for everything, right?
Yes,
you want to cut a good steak, you get a good knife, and you go with that one, right? So I think to that point, yes, there is a risk of ChatGPT is not the answer to all the acute question we have. And then you were mentioning to me that there is a new feature coming out next month or so in ChatGPT, which
the
is
store?
The store.
Oh yeah, right? The store.
Is that a way to answer it? Because then it will be like a moderator for ChatGPT, or I get it wrong?
No, the store allows you to create and reshare agents, like the one I created for the division portfolio.
Yeah.
I think I shared it on my AI link yesterday. So
you can follow Dominic. He is doing a 1 minute podcast every week or twice a week, explaining those little tips. So you can Google his name, find him on LinkedIn, and then you get the tips for AI.
Yeah. So that you can see the last 9 months, nine episodes of work. So yesterday I posted about these custom GPTs, and I think they are quite awesome. So they allow for a bit of this modularity where you create custom GPTs per task. You're still throwing a cannon at it, but at least you can really prioritize simple tasks.
But then, the way I like it is because you have one who specifically help you to clean your stain on your clothes, right? So you can like put any stain and you say, I have a stain of that, and that agent of GPT will only answer to.
You can set the photo of the
stain. You can. And that's the other things in ChatGPT. Now you can, for ChatGPT 4, so it's a paid version, but it's $20 to $20 a month, right?
Yeah.
Which I think, like, to be honest, it's an investment. You can take a picture and say, describe that picture, and it will accurately describe whatever there is in the picture, right? And it's quite amazing. I mean, for blind people, that would be fantastic. You can describe everything you see in the picture, but it's a good way to, you know, get the mood or get some of those stuff, right? So to answer the question here, I think, yeah, you're right. There is, you know, we are working in an environment which is extremely regulated, and I think we need to keep our critical thinking when we use those kind of tools in both ways, in the sense that we need to question what they give us, but we also need to question people who don't use them, because, you know, they're bringing a lot.
For me, right now, and still for at least a pretty long time, it's just an assistant. At the end, you still need a person. The difference is that person may have, let's say, 80% of the work done, or maybe 100%, but 10 or 15% of that may be wrong, and it needs to be checked. You know, so for now, that's the URS case we already mentioned 3 times.
Talking about agent, ChatGPT have an agent, and I use it for parents to explain mathematics to their kids, right? So what you do, and I did it, you take a picture of the kids' homework, and you say to the agent, and then he give you the answer of how you need to explain to your kids. So I was looking super smart, looking like at function I didn't use for like 20 years and could explain it to my daughter. She found out I was using ChatGPT, so she bypassed me now.
Yeah, so let's say in short, go modular and test the results, at least for now. But I think accuracy can go up really high, like 95% or higher. But that's, again, a long subject, I would say, to go into details how to do that. Okay, so unless GPT can be hacked by feeding wrong data, as 51% attack, it's dangerous to use data. Okay, so for ChatGPT, it's generally dangerous to use data, I would say, to some extent, because it's a live product, you know, lots of things are happening. Even the custom GPTs I mentioned a moment ago, there is already a hack which people can take your, let's say, ingested files or the instructions used for creating that custom GPT. So right now, if you publish one,
reverse engineer.
they can reverse engineer. So that's just an example. You can also, of course, upload file. I don't think you could upload a file which will like execute within the AI, because what he takes is he basically tries to convert all these files into text. Or I'm not 100% sure. I think that depends on the AI.
Those are valid questions, right? I mean, it shows that. You know, I wouldn't necessarily connect it to anything or everything, right?
Oh no, you need to have hard barriers, right? Especially for like the security, you need to have hard barriers.
We have 2 more meetings, 2 more minutes, so we're gonna. I wish we had 2 more meetings. We could go all night.
One more question. Long way to go in this artificial intelligence journey to meet with regulatory compliance.
I don't think so. I disagree with that. For me, like in 6 months, you won't read the FDA. You will have a specific GPT on regulatory that give you a very accurate answer. Now, of course, like we built one, and what we say is that we realize some blips and bobs that doesn't work in the model, right? But you could question FDA, health authority, HSA, or PICS and all in one, and get the best of every document. So I do think that from a regulatory compliance, due to the large knowledge, and if, you know, we start to build model, putting all the 483 and things like that, and all the, we could enhance compliance by using those models in a very short time, because people, you know, most of the non-compliance are not something you want to do. It's something you do by mistake, right? And the reason you do it is because you didn't know, or you didn't interpret it properly, or you didn't catch it, and things like that. So I do think that compliance for compliance perspective, which is, you know, following either a GMP or an SOP, should be enhanced by those kind of models, right?
Yeah.
Now, the question we need to ask ourselves, will that improve quality? Right? Because again, compliance is there to assure the product quality. Now, to be true to the GMP is one thing. Will that compliance increase will actually be reflecting an improvement of the product quality, or just being better at the game of being compliant, is one of the questions I would ask, right? Because for me to increase quality, then I need to put my process data into it, right?
Yeah. I think, yeah, the quality, that's a big question, right? How that goes. But for compliance, I think even the demo we have on Notification website, it's not only the regulatory documents which are there. What I also stole, I could say, is all the Q&A I could find, like the valid Q&A which has been verified. And that's something you will not generally have in your documents. That's something, if you come to that question, the reason it exists is because the answer in the documents isn't like direct. People actually went forward.
It's an interpretation. How do you interpret that?
Yeah, so you can, like, as I was saying, mature, right? You can enhance the model with these questions without actually updating the document itself. You can have those questions readily available. So then when it comes to a question which may not be so obvious or may influence the quality or not, right? You will have an answer which has already been given, you know, which, yeah, right now I think you can still find those answers. Yeah, I found them, right?
Well, for me, it's the same with the design review. I don't say design review is compliance per se, right? But the whole intent of a design from a good engineering practice, not from a GMP compliant, but from good engineering practice, design review is to make sure that we are compliant to the URLs, we are compliant to the specification in the design we are producing, right? And those tools have been proved to be useful to check whether, you know, we could find the answer on the URLs point into a document, and if not, so if you spend less time doing those checks, you will spend more time improving yours, right?
Definitely.
And then that's why you hope to be more compliant, but also spending more time doing quality work. Guys, it's 6:32. We love the topic. I don't know if anybody is still listening, but thank you for the guys who asked questions. Give us a thumbs up if you want. Follow Dominic because he's going to come with some more. And if you are interested, please reach to ISP, and we could either do another Technical Tuesday, we could take some of your questions, or we can also try to start a community of practice. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, guys.
Thank you very much for joining, and yeah, have a good evening.
Dominic,
Thanks, Pierre.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining us this evening. And if you want to watch the whole session, it will be saved onto the ISPE Singapore YouTube page. If you have any questions, please direct it to us and we can forward it on to Dominic and Pierre. All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely evening.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.